My name is Paul Williams, and welcome to the first charter meeting of the Worldwide PenPoint Developers Organization. I can see from the attendance here and the enthusiasm of people getting emailed to me across the net that I'm not the only one that's kind of excited about pen-based computing in general and the PenPoint operating system in particular. So I want to welcome you here tonight. We have a really exciting schedule, very packed, so I'm going to keep the administrative details to a minimum if I can. And so here is the agenda that we're going to go after tonight. First of all, I'm going to go over a few of the administrative details so we can get the organization going. Next, I'll open it up for announcements. Anybody that's got an announcement, like a product that you've got out or you just got your company. Is Mike Thompson here tonight? Okay, Mike just got his company funded. There may be some other people here that might want to make a brief announcement. Then we'll have an opening address from Jerry Kaplan, and he is GO's chairman. Next, we will see Arjen Maarleveld give us a talk on GO's marketing vision, kind of an updated basis on that, the latest and greatest. Then we'll have a technical talk, and that's going to be on the class manager, and that's going to be given by Craig Taylor, one of the chief architects here, maybe the chief architect. And then I'm going to have a Q&A session, and I want it to be a really good Q&A session. So we're going to have two phases of Q&A. The first phase of Q&A is we'll direct it directly at the speaker. In fact, any one of the speakers will be asking questions of. But then the second part of the Q&A is something that was popularized by the Silicon Valley Computer Society, I believe. It's called the Mapping and Random Access, and that is anybody that's got a question about anything, whether it's just getting started or whether it's how some particular bit works in the system, you get up and you give like a 30-second description of what your problem is, and then somebody in the audience will say, aha, I know the answer to that guy's question, but we won't answer it right then. What we'll do then is when everybody's asked the questions, we'll kind of break up into groups and have kind of a nerd's cocktail party without the cocktails. And we'll get together and discuss these particular issues. That way, everybody doesn't sit through every answer to every question that might not be of interest to you. We're going to give that a try. Give me some feedback. Let me know if that works. Okay, are there any questions on the announcements? Or rather, the agenda. Okay, let's get into the first part here. I wanted to briefly state what the goals of the WPDO organization is. First of all, it's an independent nonprofit organization. It is not part of GO Corporation, although as you can see, they've been very benevolent in giving us a lot of resources, and I hope that relationship will continue. And so it is independent, it is nonprofit, and let me tell you that second goal we are succeeding at very well. We are very successfully nonprofit. But then this is the point here, and this is what I want to hammer home. The purpose of this organization is to serve the needs of the developers. If we don't do that, we have no reason to exist. So what I need to do now is talk about what those services are and get feedback from you on what services you would like. First of all, are there any questions on this particular slide? Okay. Here are the services. I had a meeting with several developers here about a month ago, and we listed a whole plethora of services that we could possibly provide that developers would possibly want. And here are some of the top services that it was decided that we'd get started with. Now, we're not going to right out of the box get all of these going, but these are the ones that we're going to start getting going over time. In addition to that, we'll get other services going, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The first service is this monthly meeting. I hope to have it every month. And we're going to have it this month. It got conflicting with a few other dates. In general, it will be the second Thursday of the month. Josh, do you know if that's any, do you know if second Thursday conflicts with any go schedules?
No, I think that's a good day.
Okay, so mark it on your calendars. We'll target it for the second Thursday of the month. That was one that seemed to conflict with the least kinds of PEN meetings that we could find going on. And next month's meeting won't happen. It's going to take us a little while to engage our gears and digest all the information we're going to get back tonight. And so the next meeting will be the second Thursday in September, and I believe that's September 10th. At these meetings, it's going to be much as the forum that you will see tonight, that it's going to be technical talks, lots of discussion, lots of sharing, and demos and all sorts of things. Next, as you can see, David Schachter is giving us videotapes. And the reason for the videotapes is this is, as the name implies, a worldwide organization. We're going to try to share the things that we have going for us here in the Valley, namely we're right close to go and we can get their cooperation. We're going to share that with other organizations. We already have one starting in Waterloo, Canada, and we are I think going to get one in Boston, and there's some interest in St. Louis, so we will be spawning sister organizations all over the world. And so the videotapes is one way to share it. Also, we can share it with you if you happen to miss a meeting. There obviously we'll have to get some monies for that because we can't do it out of pocket all the time, but we'll talk about that later. Then there will be newsletters. Brad, where are you? Brad has so volunteered to write our newsletter, and at the first it's going to be kind of volunteer, but later on we need to start compensating him for some of his services because it's going to be a lot of work, and we really want to have this be a world-class newsletter that you people really get a lot of information out of. So Brad's going to be heading that up. If I have some volunteers that would like to help Brad submitting articles, writing articles, editing, that sort of thing, please talk to Brad. Why don't you stand up, Brad, so they can see us. So see Brad sometime in the evening. I've worked with Brad in the past, and I think given his expertise, we're going to have a really world-class newsletter. Other things that developers said they wanted is they desperately want sample code. They'd like to know how to get this TIFF image up, and they'd like to see a little sample of how somebody did that. Let me make a call tonight for people to submit any sample code that you would like published in the newsletter. So if you've got little bits and pieces that you could submit, we would love to have it. The other thing that people wanted is developer tools of all kinds and all varieties. You people are probably developing little things out there that has, you know, a little bell here, a little whistle there, or you would like this kind of a tool. I want to get those tools, I want to integrate them in, and then we want to distribute them on either a freeware basis or a for sale basis to try to generate some revenues for both the organization and the person that went to the trouble to develop those tools, and again to be of service to you, the developers. And the last item is the what else. I don't know what else we are going to do. That depends on you, because again, going back to our last slide, our goal is to meet the needs of the developers. So you tell us what your needs are, and we'll try to meet those within the constraints of the time, of the volunteer services that we have here, and the money that we have to pay for different things. Any questions about this slide? Okay. Let's see. That one. So, tonight, to get things started, I would like to ask you to do two things tonight. Please, 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 I've got some surveys back there. Please fill out the survey there. If I'm going to meet the needs of the developer, I darn well better know what the needs of the developer are and what your desires are. Please take the time. It's going to take a little time to fill it out, but please take the time to fill that out and turn that in. And then, as I said earlier on, I want to make a call for sample code. If you've done a little piece of sample code to do this, that, or the other, I'd like to see that. We'd like to get that into maybe the first newsletter or the second newsletter, get that published. If you've got any little developer tools that you have, or if you know of a tool that you'd like to have, please give me some information on that. Okay, are there any questions about this? All right, let me check my agenda here. I think that that is about it for a lot of the administrative details. Next thing I want to do is go into, let's go back to the agenda. Agenda has disappeared. Okay, so that's about it for the administrative details. Are there any announcements? Anybody have any announcements to make?
I got new business cards today.
Good. David's got new business cards. I do have one announcement. There is, I received a fax the other evening. This two-sided thing is a fax from John Wagoner, who is the editor of Pen World Magazine. He wanted to tell me, to tell you about his compendium, and it's going to be a database of anybody that's anybody in the pen computing industry and what products you have. And you'd certainly want, if you're a developer out there, you certainly want to get in his database. So I've got a little flyer here that he faxed me the other night, and I made up about 50 copies, so be sure and pick that up. And let's see, are there any other announcements? Oh, one other announcement. I was at Stacy's bookstore the other night. They have now a lot of the Addison Wesley books in, the Architectural Reference Guide 2, the Architectural Reference 1, the Developer's Guide, Lang, help me.
Operating guide.
Operating guide.
Application rating guide.
Okay.
The API?
And the API references may not be there yet, but they're in print and shipping.
So I did see it at Stacy's in Palo Alto. Question?
I just have an announcement.
Yes, go for it.
I just want to announce that Ink Development Corporation is proud to announce that we're shipping 2 of the first productivity applications for PenPoint in Inkware Note Taker and Inkware Photo. So he said shipping products. So we shipped those 2 products 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations. Let's give them a hand of. We want to see those products coming out. All right. Let's see. So Stacy's Pen Magazines. Did Rita or Lynn get here from Oxford? I guess they didn't make it in. Okay. All right. The last thing I have, and then we'll get on to the talk, a couple of perhaps mundane but important details. Go has been very, very nice to let us use the facilities. Please make sure that we don't abuse the privileges here. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Josh. The cafeteria is inbounds. This little lobby area is inbounds. The restrooms right down where it says exit, there's some restrooms that are inbounds. Please don't wander around their facility other than those areas. Is that correct, Josh? Okay. And also, please keep the area tidy. I've got a feeling that the janitors will have already gone home by the time we're out of here. So at the last, I'll tidy up. So I don't want to be here tidying up myself all night. So please keep the area tidy, keep things in the trash cans and that sort of thing. So are there any other announcements, anything you guys want to talk about before we get started? All right. So I would like, let's see, I guess we've got the opening address with Jerry Kaplan.
This is really phenomenal to see it turn out like this. I can't tell you how exciting it is and motivating for our own crew. It seems to be hanging around the outside of the room in general. But I'd really like to welcome you all here and appreciate your time and patience with us in this thing shines on me if I can get right in the way, I see. And I understand that we're supposed to be serving cookies, and I can't wait to find out where they're stashed.
Can you do me a favor? Move that way.
Move this way?
The white background on the screen is...
How about, well, this thing's going to shine on me. That's fine. Look, I'm going to move around just to keep you awake, David. So you can keep doing that. There are lots of things I'd really like to share with you today, because this is really the first opportunity that I've had to address some of the PenPoint developers as a group. And, in thinking about that, I thought that one of the things that I can provide that you might not be able to get from other speakers is a little bit about the history and the vision of the organization, what we're trying to accomplish, why we're here, and who we are. Now, for a lot of you, Go may have seemed like something of a disembodied entity. You know, you get kits and you get software and you find bugs and you report them, and sometimes you can get somebody to answer a question and things like that. But I just want you to know that in this building, on this floor, there are about 150 people who are really dedicated to making PenPoint and the market that we're trying to serve a success. And those are real human beings, and they really do care that you've taken the time to come out here and be with us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the original origins of the company, just because this is kind of anecdotal, fun stuff and not a lot of dry stuff. You know, the original thought behind Go came from an experience on an airplane flight that was in February of 1987. And I was working as a developer for Lotus Development Corporation, and was on an airplane with Mitch Kaplan, who's the founder of Lotus and creator of 123. And we had just completed work on a project. It was called Lotus Agenda. And Lotus Agenda was one of the first personal information managers. And the problem with it, we recognized, was that the market for it was limited by the fact that it ran on desktop computers. And there was clearly a need or a desire to take personal information and carry it with you when you were away from your desk. But at that time, the smallest portable laptop was sort of a big lunchbox type thing from Compaq. I don't think we really understood how quickly that technology was going to evolve. But as we were discussing it, we began to realize that it wasn't simply the fact that it was desk-bound that was an impediment. We discussed, I remember the conversation was, no matter how small or light you could make a portable computer, make a personal computer, it still was not going to be appropriate to use it in lots of circumstances that you would be in when you were away from your desk. And we began to realize that there was a large group of people that we've come to call today the mobile professionals, that are intelligent but non-computer users, or they get relatively little use out of computers. That's not a contradiction in terms, somebody who's intelligent and is a non-computer user. And the reason these people aren't using computers today is that they're spending their time out and about, face-to-face with others, in meetings or with customers or clients, or they're literally standing up when they're trying to use a computer, when they're moving around, and you need a surface to set a keyboard-oriented machine down on. Well, we began to discuss, well, what could be done about this? And we realized that the keyboard was a major impediment to the development of a truly mobile computing device, both in terms of size and in terms of the style of use. And it didn't take long before we came up with the idea that if you could use a pen directly onto an LCD screen, if you could eliminate disks and make a machine that didn't beep and whir and go through power-on self-test when you plugged it in, that didn't crash when you pulled the wire out of the back if you had to get going, that you could create something that was much more like a folder or notebook than like a desktop machine. And it probably took all of 30 seconds for Mitch and I to come to the recognition that not only would the physical device be different, but that the entire new class of software would need to be developed to exploit a system that would work as an interface with a pen, that would work like a notebook. And that was the origins of how Go got started. It was in recognizing that every 10 years in the computer industry, there's been a completely new class of device that has empowered new users with new uses, and that the device that will serve that role in the next decade is going to be the pen computer. The laptop or keyboard machines that we're seeing today in their smallest form have exceeded my wildest expectations of how they could shrink these things down. You've got devices today that I might describe as bonsai computers, little miniature things, and they're really quite curiosities, to get your hands in and try to work on them. On the other side, coming up from the calculator world, you have these sort of calculators on steroids. And these are, things like the Sharp Wizard and whatnot. But the basic form is you hold it in the hand and you poke it with one finger. It is quite clear to me that what will arise in the middle of that is a completely new class of device that will derive its heritage from the notebook, from pen and paper, rather than deriving its heritage from the typewriter, which is where the PC came from, as a substitute for a piece of office equipment. I think that people will no sooner take a keyboard-oriented machine into a meeting than they would have brought a typewriter 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that people will bring into a meeting or when they're face-to-face with clients papers and pencils like you've got here because of their social characteristics. Okay, so that was the meeting that I had with Mitch where the idea got started. And just to give you an idea of how far back we were on this, I mean, there were really wild questions like, was there any software that could do handwriting recognition? And how could you actually press on a screen with a pen? What would that mean? And would the resolutions of the current LCD displays provide adequate resolution to be able to see handwritten ink? I mean, there were all these very fundamental questions. And I remember with my two co-founders, Robert Carr and Kevin Doran, taking who are not standing back there, I just gestured in that direction because their offices are in that direction, taking a ruler and holding it up against a Macintosh screen and trying to figure out how big handwriting was after we managed to capture some of that and get it up onto the screen. So there were some really fundamental questions 5 years ago. And we have come a long, long way, I think. Because when we started this endeavor, we really were pretty much alone. We felt a little bit like people who had gone out into the wild western territories of Oklahoma or something and just staked out a claim in a nice area and began to try to raise beets or corn or something like that. And today, there's been like a land rush. And the big issue for us is trying to protect our turf to make sure nobody steals our beets and tomatoes. So the entire focus of the organization, I think, has shifted as I think there's been a growing recognition among an ever-widening circle of developers, end users, and system suppliers and hardware manufacturers that this is likely to be a major new area. Now, let me just tell you one other anecdote about how we got started, and that is that I ran into this whole thing was just kind of a theoretical discussion until I ran into a gentleman by the name of John Doerr, who is a partner at a venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins Caulfield and Byers here in San Francisco. And I explained this idea to John, and he's a very enthusiastic kind of guy, especially about new technical projects. And John said, well, why don't you come in and talk to a few of my partners about this? Now, I wasn't terribly sophisticated about what that meant, and at the appointed time, I showed up in their office, probably just about as I am today. And there's sort of this line of entrepreneurs with their gadgets and their slides, and they're all in their Sunday best, ready to make their presentation to this group of venture capitalists in this room. And it was a little bit like those cartoons of like life at the patent office. Everybody's sitting there with their little invention. And these guys would go in with their market projections and, and showing all this carefully thought out business plan and how much this was going to grow. Well, I hadn't prepared anything. And I brought with me a leather case. And it was, in fact, this leather case. One of my great achievements of the past 5 years has been not to lose this leather case. Now, I went into the room, and I basically took this case and threw it down in the center of what was a large, round mahogany table that they were all around, and explained the basic concept. And a melee of discussion is the only way I can describe it, ensued. I was almost didn't participate in that much of it. They were all arguing with each other, and they were reaching out and touching this periodically. Like, well, it could be sort of like this, but maybe it would be a little bit different. And yeah, maybe you could, you wouldn't have a keyboard, but can you really operate a computer without a keyboard? And all of this discussion going on. And I was reminded something of the scene in 2001 where there's the obelisk, and like the monkeys are coming up and going like this. In any case, at the end of the conversation, they said, okay, well, thank you very much. That's very nice. And I went out, and, the next guy came in with his carefully prepared 35mm slides on his project. And about 2 weeks later, John called me up and said, we'll back you to do this. And I picked myself up off the floor, and I said, but you haven't, seen a business plan or anything. He said, that's okay. Now, that's when I learned what really first-class venture capitalists do. These were, in fact, the same guys, I think, that funded Compaq based on a sketch on a napkin. And since that time, they've been very supportive of us through 5 years of thick and thin, and really been wonderful partners for us as well. But anyway, that was I knew walking out of that meeting that we'd covered the hard problem, which was getting financed, initial financing, and that's sort of what got the whole operation started. When I said that was the last anecdote about that I was going to tell, I guess I lied, because I want to tell you one other, which is how Robert Carr got involved in this. Most of you, I assume, have met or seen or heard Robert, who's really the driving force behind the design of the software and management of the whole software team. Having had success with the leather case with the venture capitalists, I called up Robert. Robert was at that time chief scientist of Ashton Tate. Ashton Tate was, I think, the third largest software company at the time. I was working with Lotus Development, which was the largest, and Microsoft was a company in the middle that was making an operating system called DOS. And we both coincidentally lived in San Francisco, even though his company was located in LA and my company in Boston. And so I invited him out to lunch around Clement Street, which is where he lived. And we sat down, and I brought my trusty case to see if it would work again. And I described this thing to Robert, and I put it down in front of him. And he said, I went through this, and I said to him, well, what do you think? Is this of any interest to you? And Robert's a very thoughtful and studious guy. And with his little horn-rimmed glasses, he looks down at this, and he looked up to me and he said, it's not a question of whether I want to do this. This is important. This is something we have to do. And I think that with the 150 people who work here today, they understand that they're part of a process of the evolution of computing, of bringing computing power to a wider and wider group of people and making them more productive, changing the way they work, changing the way they think. And that is the mission that we're probably well on our way to doing today. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to cover. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the Go philosophy of how we want to accomplish what we're doing. Many companies have different styles. I guess this is the issue of corporate culture. But I want you to understand the way we view things here at Go. And that is that, we're really a small company. And we can't do all of the things that are necessary to build and to create the pen computing market as we see it and as we want it to be. And so the only way really for us to succeed at that, particularly in today's environment, is to create economic opportunities for partners, for other people. When we first managed to land a deal with IBM, we withdrew from making our own hardware. I don't know how many of you were around back then, but there are these wonderful little prototypes that we had built back then. And there are other examples of that same process where our view is that we succeed by making our partners successful. Now, I think it is Larry Ellison of Oracle who's fond of quoting maybe Genghis Khan, and he says that it is not enough alone. It is not enough that I succeed, all others must fail. We have exactly the opposite view here. Our view is that it is not enough alone that we succeed, all others must succeed too. And our goal is to create those economic opportunities for developers, for hardware manufacturers, for value-added resellers, in producing the best possible product to change the way people work and the way people think. So there's one other aspect of our philosophy that I think is worthy of mention, and that is that there's no such thing as a great product that doesn't sell. We're not here just to build great technology. Our real purpose and the measure of our success is whether people actually use it to improve their work and to improve their lives. And I encourage you all, if you're doing PenPoint development, to take that point of view as well. I like PenPoint. I think it's a great product. I think the architecture is good. There are lots of things that we're working on to improve it, and I think that through this organization, there's a lot of feedback we can get, to help us make it a better and better product over time. But our goal is not to prove that it's a beautiful and wonderful product. Our goal is to make people successful in using it to solve real problems. One of the phrases that we use internally to describe this market, which is quite a remarkable circus, I think you would all agree, if you read the trade press and all the ups and downs that go on, is the term we use is urgent patience. And that is the tone that we need to adopt inside our company. It's something that I would urge on you. It's important to get out there and build your applications and make them the best that you can and to work hard on them in order to take a significant position in the coming pen computing market. But also, it's important to recognize that this isn't going to happen overnight. That we're at the beginning now of a process that will unfold over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And you have to have that patience to grow with the market. The people who were successful in the early days of the PC market were those that understood that it was going to take time for a lot of these things to come to fruition. And from a period of about 1978 to 1983 or 4, people who invested their time and effort in a manner that I might call urgent patience are the ones that were most successful. So with that, I just want to leave you with the thought that by partnering with us and participating in the developer organization, you are in fact part of something that is very important and has the potential to make a difference to a lot of people. I think that by doing PenPoint development, I can safely predict that you will have some interesting stories to tell your grandchildren as a result. So again, let me just thank you all for coming, and we've got a lot of interesting technical presentations to come, and that was basically all I had to say. Do you want me to take any questions? Or
Yeah, why don't we open up for some questions? We want to keep moving because there's going to be quite a number of people. Anybody got some questions?
Would you loan me your notebook?
This one?
All right.
So do you,
I have a question.
Yeah, Dave.
The article in the Chronicle last week, probably from a press release, what's the deal with AT&T and Go?
Yeah. How many people here don't know about that announcement? I'm just curious to see how. Oh, quite a few. Okay. We had a major announcement last week with the AT&T Microelectronics Group. Part of our vision for where this technology is going is toward smaller, lighter, longer battery life devices that I think will serve as a new form of communication tool for mobile professionals. And if you look back through all of our marketing nonsense over the past 5 years, you'll see descriptions of that. We've also said over the past year or two, that PenPoint has been designed to be portable across different architectures. Well, AT&T Microelectronics has developed a processor and a processor family, really, of chips that go along with that is exceptionally well suited for mobile communications devices. Obviously, AT&T is very interested in things that generate traffic over their phone networks and other, the EasyLink, AT&T mail networks as well. In evaluating it, we felt that chipset was ideally suited to create low-cost, high-performance products running PenPoint, and they on the other side saw PenPoint as the right kind of mobile oriented operating system in order to run on that chipset. We've actually been working with them for close to a year now, although we've not made any public announcements until last week, in order to create a version of PenPoint that will be available on the Hobbit chipset. And there are a number of major companies who have been secretly developing portable pen computers based upon this combination. Now, last week we had an announcement with AT&T that we were engaged in such a partnership, and I think they're an excellent partner for Go, in addition to our other partners such as IBM and a lot of the other licensees that we've been working with, because they obviously know a lot about communications. They have a tremendous capability for creating silicon. It's quite remarkable, the size and nature of that business that they've got. They've got some wonderful technology in the Hobbit chip itself. Believe it or not, they are a major force in consumer marketing. where I think a lot of these devices are going to go. And last but not least, they have a lot of money. So we have engaged in a partnership with AT&T, and I think that over the next several months you'll see a number of announcements about directions of where that's going and what you can expect to see as a result. There is what's been called a white paper, but it has a red cover. And I didn't realize that, I don't know, maybe we can even locate some of those. I'll poke around after Arjen comes up. See if I can locate some of those. You might want to take that. That explains a lot more about that partnership. So that was kind of a long answer, but that's what.
And then I guess other people have questions.
Yep.
Do you carry one?
One of what?
A pen machine?
Yeah, actually, I'm using all my children are wonderful, but I'm presently using an NCR 3125 to do a number of different things, and it's a good first step.
Outside of just demoing, I mean, you actually use it to keep your own documents and information.
Yeah, I mean, I have on and off. It tends to get stolen by our QA department and other people, so I can't necessarily rely on having complete control over it. If I can leave it in my office and go away for a day off, and I come back to find it gone. But yeah, I've done a number of things with it, and several people here in the organization also are regular active users of pen computers. In fact, in our marketing department, one of the things we're doing is trying to force everybody to do their actual work on PenPoint, which is an interesting experience given the range of stuff that they have and the relative state of the software applications market that's available for it. So we're going to eat our own medicine, as it were. Yes, sir.
Yeah. How do you differentiate Apple's Newton and computer based on Go operating system?
Well, I mean, there are a number of aspects to that. I mean, I could go on at some length, but let me just try to summarize some of the key differences as I see them. We have a product shipping, they don't. I think there is a difference in philosophy. I recently saw a demo of the Newton product. It was very cute. It was kind of toy-like. It made ripping noises and drawers opened and closed and things like that. And it was an excellent piece of work, by the way. But there's a difference in philosophy between that and the view that you're trying to build a business tool and not something that's trying to entertain or be playful. So stylistically, it's got a very different focus. To my knowledge, they're not licensing their software widely, although they have some partners who are manufacturing product. I've seen a lot of traffic, which I follow on, I guess it's internet or CompuServe or whatever. And, people are they're not actively courting a wide range of developers. I think that besides that, we have a system that's been designed for mobile communications. And when you get down to brass tacks and talk about the specifics, those things are very real. We're putting in place a lot of the infrastructure that will be necessary for people to be able to send and receive messages, overnight, or have their machine wake up and do things, and with our multitasking architecture and all that. I think that the demos and the promise of the Apple Newton product look very compelling. I think it's an excellent product, and I think that in a certain class of applications we will compete with that. But I think that we are likely to we have a good opportunity to take the bulk of sort of the professional business-oriented market in that handheld class of device.
Can Newton run PenPoint?
No, it's based upon Lisp, I believe. They may have ported it to something else now.
I'm wondering, is the hardware is the
could the
hardware
new
in the
hardware?
box?
No, actually, this is totally happenstance. Actually, the Hobbit chip, not many people know this, but it's absolutely true. The Hobbit chip was designed originally for Newton, and we're very glad to make use of it through the AT&T relationship. But they're using a different processor, which is the ARM chip, the Acorn RISC machine chip. In many respects, those chips are sort of in the same class. The advantage of the Hobbit, from our perspective, is the surrounding logic that AT&T is working to incorporate relating to things like cellular modems, communications facilities, DSPs, et cetera. Yeah.
Let's take one more question and then we'll move on.
Yes, sir.
Can you say anything about, you were talking about the AT&T, the Hobbit chip, what kind of battery life you expect to see in some devices, say, within a year? Since a lot of people.
The question is, what kind of battery life do we expect to see in devices over the next year? The longest credible claim that I have seen was 7 hours. for a device which will be shown before the end of this year. Really, really nice device. I can't be any more forthcoming because obviously I'm under NDA, but I think they made a good case. They'll be getting a 7 hours on charge
Where
battery
do you
life.
see that?
That's in a
moving?
device that's quite light.
Where do you see that moving over the next few years?
I think it's going to increase, but mainly it'll increase through the use of low-power logic. The battery technology is not moving that quickly. There's no great breakthroughs that I'm aware of. People are moving from the nickel-cadmium to the nickel hydride batteries, which will get about a 10 or 15% increase. The main advantage comes from being able to operate it. I think it's 3.3 volts is the typical thing, because you can kind of draw that directly out of the battery instead of having to step it through some process. So PenPoint, as you may know, was designed with a whole bunch of features to allow us to power down or shut down various parts of the process and processor. And I think we'll be able to achieve a really pretty significant battery life. If I had to guess, longest battery life by the end of next year would probably be in the 10 to 12 hour range, on the charge.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, why don't you get up and stretch around just a little bit in between the talks, and I would like to introduce Arjen Maarleveld, and Arjen is the Manager of Development Relations here at Go Corporation, and he's going to talk, I think, about Go's marketing vision. So get some good stretches there, and why don't we take it just a Pen World or Pen Magazine? I'm never quite sure.
Magazine.
Okay, it's Pen Magazine. We have a representative from Pen Magazine, Rodney Brooks, and I missed him with the earlier announcements. He's got an announcement to make. Do you want to make that, Rodney?
Just essentially, you heard about the compendium. It'll be a directory of all products, services, software, development tools, whatever, available for Pen computers. We're planning on having it available in January. A copy of it will go to each one of our subscribers, and there is information about how to get information on CompuServe. So that you can make sure that you get a listing in there. It'll be like a yellow pages.
Okay, thank you, Rodney.
Oh, also there are copies of Pen World or Pen Magazine on the table in the other room.
Yes, help yourself to the copies. Okay, with no further ado then, Arjen Maarleveld.
Hi, I know some of you, a lot of you I don't know. Look forward to getting to know you. I think that's going to be a big benefit of this organization. Just wanted, before I launch into my talk, which won't be quite about market vision because I think Jerry really summed up a lot of that, but I'm going to talk more about market specifics, which I think is the other piece of this that many of you are going to be interested in terms of thinking about investing your time and effort in this business. So I first want to introduce a few people who helped make this meeting happen. Obviously, besides Paul and David Schachter, and we're real happy that they're taking this initiative. We hope you'll support them in it. There's a number of people here at Go who, especially those of you on CompuServe, will recognize and may be meeting here for the first time. Josh Axelrod, who manages our tech support group. Those of you who are active PenPoint programmers already probably have benefited from many of his efforts. Josh. S. Page, is S in view? Those of you on CompuServe will definitely know the name S. Page, the amazing tech support guy. He's around. Atri Chatterjee, just poking his head in, is our developer tools product manager. So if you have ideas about what we ought to be doing in that area, please let him know.
Fill out the SDK survey. That's on CompuServe. There's a survey out, the feedback thing on CompuServe. Please fill it out and send it back. It's long. Like there's an essay question and all that, but we're actually using it to do some product planning here with our engineering folks.
Did EWOUT go away? I know another
he's
tech
in
support.
SDK.
Okay, he's back doing tech support. Lang Zerner, who's in our documentation group, another great supporter of our developer efforts. And if you have any suggestions for documentation, talk to Lang. Okay. If I missed anybody else who turned out, there's a lot of enthusiasm here. Oh, some engineers from Go. John Bennett. Any other engineers hiding in there? I think. Oh, well, he's going to get introduced. You'll meet him anyway. These folks are here because they're excited about seeing all the work that we've been doing here at Go turn into things we never expected to see. We couldn't predict some of the things that are coming out of developers' efforts. And it's exciting for us to be involved with that creativity. That's part of what makes my job probably one of the nicest jobs in the industry right now. I get to see and work with, see the development of applications and technologies that are so exciting from every respect. You know, working with people like yourselves who are excited about the new industry that we're building together, and working with the group of people here at Go as well. Let me tell you a little bit more about what my group does just quickly, so you get a little context for what some of the things I'll be talking about as far as the market. The developer relations group, probably the most important function we serve in this stage of the market is actually sort of a matchmaking function. You know, at this, especially over the last year or two, before the beginning of organizations like this, it hasn't been very easy for people who are interested in this technology to find each other and to find ways of working together. And so a lot of what we've been doing is just giving people telephone numbers and saying, well, you're an engineer, you want to find a marketing guy who's interested in this, you know, talk to this person. And I think that's something we want to continue to do, although I hope that as the market continues to grow, we won't be able to do it on a one-to-one basis as much, but this organization will serve as a great place to do that. I know, for example, a number of PenPoint developers are actively looking for PenPoint engineers. And this organization, I think, will be a great place to find a job if you're looking for a place to do PenPoint engineering. But more than anything, I think it's also a place for PenPoint developers to independently, as a group, educate yourselves, share information, and give us guidance and feedback in terms of the things that we ought to be doing. We really are we're hoping that this organization will develop the kind of cohesion and active organization that will give us a lot of help in terms of figuring out what we ought to be doing in PenPoint and for Go as an organization. How many of you here are currently active PenPoint developers? Great. It's a good mix. How many of you are on CompuServe from time to time or follow the CompuServe PenPoint activities? Hopefully S will talk a little bit more about the CompuServe forum, but this is another way to get more information about doing PenPoint development, especially from a technical perspective. Again, if you haven't been on CompuServe in our forum, it's the GoCorp forum. Just type GoCorp, and S runs an amazing show there. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of the market as it has developed in the last few months and where it's going about in the next 12 to 18 months. Obviously, this is an important issue for us, just as it is for you, and we try to come up with as much data as we can to help you make your plans. One of the things to say up front is that, as many of you in the business already know, things haven't developed as quickly as we prognosticated 12 to 18 months ago. The reality of the market just at this moment is that there are great applications shipping, such as the ones from Inc., also from PenMagic, a product called Pencil, a number of great apps out there for you to try, and of course they're listed in the catalog that you can pick up out there. But the hardware hasn't been available in the kind of quantities that we all would like. So the question I hear probably most often is, well, when is the hardware really going to start shipping in volume? And because we work so closely with OEMs, we get a bit of a peek at the insides of their functioning and their plans. And while as our record isn't perfect in terms of predicting this, it does. The news we're getting from OEMs is very encouraging. Not only in terms of the production of their existing models, such as the 3125 or the ThinkPad or the GridPad SL, the various machines you've seen at shows and that you've seen running PenPoint, which are all at various stages within a month or two of shipping in quantity. But also the next generation of machines, the machines that have been in development over the last 12 months, from other manufacturers who haven't perhaps been as visible at the shows or in the trade press. So especially, we expect to see at PC Expo, for example, in Chicago, and at Comdex, the introduction of a tremendous variety of tablet-class hardware and some sub-tablet class hardware that's really going to help get this market going. One of the things, we have to have all the pieces in place for the customer, of course, the end user who's the person we're doing all this for, to be able to experience what we're so excited about. Many of us have enough background in this to be able to see the market vision and get excited about that, but the customers want to really try it. And the ones who are buying 3125s now, the ones who are buying ThinkPads now or GridPad SLs, Samsung machines, are starting to really get excited about that. And the feedback we are getting from the pilot projects, from the people who are doing PenPoint, who are using PenPoint to do their work, is very, very favorable. So while we've adjusted our expectations for this year, given the delay in the availability of hardware, in fact, we and also many of the industry analysts and venture and financial people we work with have adjusted their expectations for next year upward because of the kind of positive response that we're hearing both from the people who are the early users of the technology and the level of interest in terms of latent demand for the kinds of functionality that OEMs are offering. So while the trend lines are all the same as you've seen elsewhere in the computer industry, lighter, cheaper, faster, longer battery life, et cetera, all these trends are working in our favor. There's really no distinction from a hardware perspective as far as costs, marketing costs, et cetera, for a pen-based tablet machine as compared to a notebook. One of the key things to talk about here, and again for this organization to work on as a group, hopefully with us at Go, is to look at a specific aspect of this market vision that Jerry's talked about. And that is that the exciting thing about PenPoint is that not that we're trying to offer something slightly different or slightly, a slight novelty to the existing computing market. This is the hard part. The dream is new applications for new users. The excitement and the business appeal is that with the current desktop market not growing at the same rate that we've been accustomed to over the last 10 years, with increasing competition and selling to those same people for, with commodity products, here is a situation where we believe we have a set of products and an industry that can grow around a new group of users who are not currently using computing technology. And part of that ties into the AT&T announcements in terms of communications being an important facet of this technology. Part of it is just to do with ease of use and mobility. That's the same themes we've been talking about for the last 4 or 5 years. Now, how do we work together to build that new market? That's a really key issue because it's pretty easy to just do a tweak on the existing, well, ours runs faster, it's lighter, it's cheaper version of marketing that's happening in the PC market today. But to go out and reach new users who are not interested in desktop PCs, for whom a lighter, smaller notebook PC that runs Windows is, not that exciting, that's a much trickier element. And that's the kind of work that's being done in the marketing and sales groups here at Go. And it's the kind of work that we want to work with you on as in selling your applications, because the application is the software portion of making that market reality. We can't talk about serving the needs of new users with new applications without you being part of that process and you making that a reality with your creativity and your insights into the needs of users. So we're looking forward to a partnership with you, both at the development level, the technical level, the interactions that this organization can help raise to a higher and higher level for you as a group, but also at the marketing and sales level, when people like Stratton Sklavos, who just walked in, our new Vice President of Sales, is out creating demand with customers, helping OEMs understand how to serve these new markets, which maybe they don't quite understand themselves. We need you to come along, show your applications, show your vision of the market that you want to reach, show your vision of why you think you're going to make money, and reach customers with your products, because it's a total solution that's going to make that happen. Okay, well, I worked myself into a frenzy. Happens sometimes, excuse me. Let me talk about a couple other things. Numbers. Everybody wants numbers, either because they're trying to do a business plan, or because they're going out for some money, or because they've got to try to figure out how many boxes to print, whatever it happens to be, you know, from the highfalutin to the prosaic. And we are trying to be as helpful as we can in terms of giving you numbers that you can work with and yet you can believe. Now, as Jean-Louis Gasset used to say at Apple, anybody who claims they can forecast this business is lying. Flat out. You know, this is hard to forecast. No, this is new users, new markets. We don't have anything to base a lot of these things on other than what we know OEMs can produce and what we believe we're hearing from the marketplace, from the customers, and what we think we can help support. But the numbers that a lot of the people who are paid to generate numbers are generating recently are very exciting, partly because they're starting to understand the vision that we're trying to support here a little better. Okay, so that's when I said earlier on in my talk that, in fact, the analysts are raising their expectations for 93 is because they're starting to understand that what we talked about on print, in Robert Carr's Power of PenPoint book, for example, a year or two ago, as far as PenPoint being an architecture that spans not just a tablet-sized machine, but also a pocket-sized machine or any kind of mobile device, they're starting to see the reality of that coming out in announcements like the AT&T announcement and some of the other kinds of innovative hardware that are in the wings waiting to come out. So between the appeal of the tablet market that we're all starting to understand better, and the new users and new uses that we're starting to understand better, and the fact that the analysts are starting to understand that, hey, we can really produce these small devices and tie them into the major communications networks of the country and the world, their predictions are going up. But we have to be prudent, obviously. We're playing, in most cases, with our own money, with our own careers, with our own futures. So let me give you a couple of top-of-the-head numbers that that are sort of our own operating basis for being excited about this market. And these are obviously just very rough numbers, and I'm happy to sit down. One of the functions we can provide for you as developers is to sit down with you and work through your business planning process, working with the analysts, understanding your particular market, hopefully, although you'll probably understand it better than we do, to try and come up with some of these predictions. Our current, what we're hearing now from OEMs as far as their predictions for this year, as far as machines that are capable of running PenPoint, is somewhere, and you have to take big plus or minuses on this, but it's in the 20 to 80,000 unit range. That's been revised down a bit from what was being predicted earlier in the year. Okay, but for 93, we've seen the numbers going up, and of course it depends who you talk to, which newsletter you subscribe to, etc. But the numbers are for 93 are in the 250,000 to 750,000 range. Okay, and that's explosive growth by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. That's exciting. That's why we're here. Okay, it's challenging for all of us. Go has hired, and some of you may have seen the ads we've placed to hire people. We've been hiring people like crazy this year. I think we've hired something like 40 people this year. Okay, because we have to prepare for that kind of growth. We need people like Stratton Scalavos to help us go out and generate the demand. He went away because he hates it when I talk about him. But he's out there getting these units to actually happen. Most of the excitement, though, I think, in terms of this kind of growth, really comes from new uses, and new uses and new users. Okay, come back to that theme. What these analysts are still thinking about, they look at the box, they look at the capabilities, and they think about it in terms of the existing market. That's all they can work off of to forecast. You are the ones, I hope, that have insights into new markets, that are building software or thinking about building software that nobody's thought about before. And that's what we're counting on for being at the upper end of that level of growth that these analysts are predicting, or maybe exceeding it. Because again, they're working with old assumptions. They don't have the insight and creativity that you have, and they're not looking at the possibilities in the way that you are. So I'm very excited to be working with this organization as it evolves. We want to really support it, participate in it actively, but it's your organization. when we met with Paul and David and others early on to talk about this organization, we want this to be an independent organization because its value to us is greatest when it's yours and you're telling us what you think and what you see from your perspective. Okay, it's not something that we want to run. You have to run it, and we'll support it and participate in it to the extent that you want us to. I'm looking forward to being a part of that. I think developer services and tech support and the training groups here, the product management groups, are all eager to participate in that and learn from that. And if you have ideas of ways we can improve our communications, our support, our documentation, our products, we want to hear about it from you. Okay? So it's another great opportunity for you to interact directly with us. We're looking forward to it. Thank you very much. I think it'd be better just to move on with the agenda and be happy to answer questions after we break again.
Okay, let me take a show of hands. Do you want to have another break before we go into technical talk, or you just want to go to technical talk and then we'll do cookies? Sounds like we're going to go.
I do want to report that the WPDO Quality Control Committee has checked the cookies and has verified that they are of high quality.
Okay, high quality cookies. All right, so we'll move right on then to the technical talk. And I would like to introduce Craig Taylor, Chief Architect. Is that the correct term, Craig? Okay.
Sure, why don't you start off? Hi, so I'm Craig Taylor. It's great to be here. It's very exciting to see all these people. This is the propeller head part of the talk, so all the people who enjoyed Jerry's part of the talk aren't going to enjoy this part of the talk. But all the people who are ready to go to sleep when Jerry's talking, they're going to love this part. So what I was going to do today, since there's such a mixed crowd, is I'm going to try to go through some what we call sort of advanced class manager features. If you use the class manager a lot, they're not going to seem advanced to you. But if you're just starting to use it, they're going to seem sort of mysterious. So I picked this sort of middle ground. I'm going to talk about sending, posting, and then what I'd like to do, I'm going to keep it pretty short. And then I'd like to just have people ask questions. So I'm going to try to stimulate you guys to ask me some questions, and we'll go from there. And then when we're done, if you guys can give us some feedback on the level, then the next time we can start refining this. Because, you know, they said, hey, we want to talk. And there are going to be people here who want to develop for PenPoint, and there are people who have been developing for PenPoint. And I'm like, what kind of talk am I going to give? So I sort of picked this middle ground. So I'd love to get some feedback here. You know, if you think this is too complicated, you tell me. If you think it's like, hey, we knew all that stuff, Greg. Like, tell us something we didn't know. So I'm going to do this. Ask me questions. If you want to get into depth, I'm the guy. I can tell you anything you want to know. I'll tell you more than you want to know. Okay. And
Just a matter of seconds.
it's just a matter of seconds. It's booting. There it is. All right.
Square button, right?
I think I can do that.
Okay.
I get in here. Jesus. Okay, so if you haven't used a class manager, this is what it's about. If you have, hopefully you all know this. So it supports object-oriented programming. I mean, that is the class manager. In PenPoint, it's the component in the operating system. It's built right into the kernel, okay, and it supports object-oriented programming. So the entire OS, I mean, the kernel itself, uses the features that are supplied here, which is why we built it in. Basically, what it's going to do is going to create and destroy objects. I mean, you know, that's sort of the fundamental thing. If you don't have objects, you're not going to get very far with object-oriented programming. So that's what we're doing with the creation and destruction. Provides sort of what you expect. Class inheritance, it's single inheritance. So, you know, you have a class, you can subclass that class, you can subclass that class, on and on and on. The whole idea of inheritance is that you get to inherit behavior. Therefore, in theory, you know, you only do the changes, the differences between what you want and what you already have. And finally, it does the message passing. It's the thing that says, I've got this message and I've got this object, sort of get this message to the right method, execute the method, make things happen for me. So that's sort of what the class manager is doing in a broad sense. Now, the specifics, there's two predefined classes. There's class object and class class. So this is what the class manager makes visible to everybody. Okay? There's nothing else. There's some functions that we'll talk about. But in terms of objects, these are the two objects. So class object is the root of everything. Okay? Every object and every class is all rooted in class object. Okay? So that's sort of the top of the tree. And then class class is what all classes are made from. Now, as I go along, if you have questions, I'm not sure if I saw hands or not, or whether people are just, you know, stretching. But if you have questions, please ask, because I'll just keep zipping along. And the way my talks usually work is the less questions you ask, the faster my talk goes. Because I start picking up speed, and once I get rolling, there's no stopping. All right. So these two objects, they present, and if you've used the class manager at all, you have property messages, you have new defaults, all those messages are implemented by these two classes. Okay? So then the other stuff I want to talk about today, and this is the area that I'm going to sort of get in when I talk about sends and posts, is there's basically synchronous and asynchronous behavior. So this is where things start to get interesting. Typically in an application, you're going to use object call. Object call is sort of analogous to doing a subroutine call. I mean, you say, I want to send this message to this object. Well, if you use object call, that's going to go through the lookup mechanism. Finally, it's going to get to a method. It's going to run that method right inside your task. The other thing that PenPoint lets you do, which is very different than most other object-oriented systems, it allows you to send messages across tasks and across processes. Now, just as a reminder, we use sort of process and task loosely, but a process is an address space, and a task is an execution context. So what you can have is, within a process, you can have multiple tasks. And often we will just blur those two together and talk about executing in a process. What we really mean is, within this address space, there is task 0, which is always running within a process. So that's just sort of the shorthand. But what you can do then is you can send from the task 0 in one address space a message to another address space, run it in its task, and then get the result back. Now that's a really powerful feature, because now all of a sudden, instead of there being some very special sort of operating system things that are shared across the entire system, anything that you put into the global environment that somebody sends a message to looks like it's part of this global environment. So all the stuff that Go provides as part of the operating system is in the global environment, and all the tools that an ISV loads into the environment all look the same, because you get to them the same way. There's no sort of low-level OS, package up a bunch of junk and then stick it over there on the other side, pick it up and unpack it, and then turn around and do the call. Class Manager does all that stuff for you, so it's all done. You just say, I want to send a message to an object. If that object is in another process, boom, off it goes. It'll just do the right thing for you. Now, in that context, there are two ways you can do it. You can do it synchronously, meaning you send the message to the object in another process, and you sit there and you wait for its response. When it's done processing the method, it returns a result to you, and then you say, great, and on you go to do your thing. But the other thing you can do is you can have asynchronous, where what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to send a message over there, and I'm going to keep running. In other words, I'm going to tell you I want you to go do something for me, but I don't want to wait for the result. I'm just going to keep running. Somehow I'll sync back up. I'll look. You'll send me back a message that I can use, or I'll look in some global database for the results. Whatever scheme you want to use is available, but the point is you don't wait around for it. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Finally, there's sort of different flavors of instance data. If you've looked at the class manager, you know that you could tell the class manager, I want 25 bytes of instance data. And if you do that, it will create a block of protected instance data. And what that means is the class manager will put that in a place in the kernel that is only accessible by the kernel. And what you have to do is you can say, give me the value, and it'll give you this block, and then you can modify it, and then you say, here's this block, save it away from me. Now, that's a great feature in the sense it guarantees that no matter what an app, any app in the system does, it's never going to be able to touch your instance data. There's no way it can corrupt your instance data. So what we do for system objects, where if you crash a system object, the whole notebook's going to go down, we store all the data in that protected area. Now, the disadvantage of that is every time you want to change your instance data, you got to write this stuff back into this protected place, which means you got to call the class manager and say, please write this data back. And that's relatively slow if you're going to sit there and hammer away at this instance data. So some people use protected instance data. You'll notice in 1.0 that there's a flag that unfortunately didn't get particularly well documented, and that's mostly my fault, which is there's a thing called unprotected instance data, which is the equivalent to saying, allocate a heap block and store a pointer to that heap block, and whenever I ask for my instance data, just give me the pointer to the heap block. Now the nice thing about the heap block is it's in user protected storage. You can read and write that thing directly. You don't have to go through this complicated write cycle. The disadvantage is if something goes berserk inside your address space and starts writing on random heap blocks, one of the things it might write on is your instance data. Question in the back.
Do you guarantee persistence for that too, or do you?
Guarantee persistence in what sense?
How does the operating system know that you've written over it so that it can saved it at some point?
Well, I mean, the saving in the sense that when you get an object, I'm sorry. Yeah, the question was, how do you deal with persistence? I mean, there's this heap block. I mean, what do you do? I mean, basically the same thing you do with anything. When you get the object saved, you say, okay, let me get my instance data, and whatever portion of that instance data you want to save, you write to the stream. And so this heap block, from your point of view, just looks like a block. It's a block of bytes, just like anything else. So you would pick things out of that you'd want to save. So remember, that's really the class's responsibility to save it, to make the object write itself into the file system. The class manager doesn't do that. It sets up the protocol for doing it, but doesn't actually do the operation. Question?
Get this unprotected instance data in your P data pass back?
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. I mean, one, you can do it yourself. When you get your message in init, you can go say, I'm going to go allocate a heap block, and then in my instance data, that protected instance data, you write the pointer. And then every time it comes in, if you dereference that pointer, you've got a pointer to heap block. So that's one way to do it. Now in 1.0, we said, well, geez, a bunch of people are already doing this, and this seems like kind of a waste of time that everybody's doing this for themselves all the time. So there's a flag that you can set in the class that says, I want to have unprotected instance data. And if you do that, it basically does that procedure for you automatically.
Where's the flag? In class?
Where, you mean where's it defined? Classmanager.h, and you set it on the class. Okay? So, what?
What's the name of the flag?
It's capability, it's instance data or something. Just unprotected. Yeah, I think you're right. ObjCap unprotected. I only implement the stuff, I don't keep track of the details. So, okay, so that's the idea in the instance data. So again, the idea here is, if you think you need to access it a lot, but you're happy with having protection within your context, then you can use this unprotected instance data, or you can allocate your own heap block. If you think you're a system object, where if you fail, the system goes down in flames, or you have a global database, where if your global database gets screwed up, I mean, all your apps are going to crash, then you might want to use protected instance data. All right. Now, is this about the right level? Yes, no? I mean, faster, slower, more depth, less depth? About right. Okay. Quick comment?
The focus. Can we focus a tad bit, or is it good?
No. Can I focus this thing?
No, that's as focused as
Let's see. Is that clearer or blurry?
Just hold it there.
Yeah, hold it there. Okay, yeah, I'll just stand here. All right. Here, maybe if I just pointed this stuff. So, just kidding. Here we go. Is this getting better? Is this getting better, guys? Yeah. Okay. Really? All right. So, just kidding. Okay. It's late, work all day. All right, so this is the simplest model. Okay, I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit. So this is what object call looks like, sort of schematically. Is you do an object call, it goes into the class manager. Class manager does the lookup of the message and converts that message into an underlying method. It executes the method. It may go through superclasses to execute their methods. Eventually, it returns a result back up to object call. Okay, pretty straightforward. And this sort of tells you, and this is just here to remind you, for people who've never seen this, just to let you know, there really is like code, it's like C code, it looks like this, it's object call, you give it a message, the object, and a pointer to your argument block, and it returns a status. So, this stuff all works. If you've developed, you got to believe me, you rely on this stuff. All right, now let's go to sort of the next step. Here's an object, and here are multiple classes. So now what happens is you do this object call, and it goes to the first class and it does the lookup and it finds the method. And then if it wants to call the ancestor, it goes to the second class and does the lookup and it calls the method. And then if that, it calls its ancestor, it goes to the top class, which is? Class object, right, okay. Does the lookup and runs the method there. Okay, so this is, again, is the paradigm. It always is doing this, no matter what, for the next ones I'm going to talk about, for send, for post async, for post direct, for, you name it. All of them are basically doing the same thing, okay? And so this is the model to think about. And the instance data is always stacked up. There's instance data for class 1, instance data for class 2, and instance data for class 3. Now, one thing that's different about PenPoint, and again, we think this is a good thing, is that this class, when you call this method, can access its instance data, and only its instance data. Now, in things like Smalltalk, it's nice because you can say, oh, well, my superclass has this variable, and I'm going to just access the thing, and that's nice. But in a system where you want to have protection, if you subclass a system object and you reach up into its instance data and you screw up its instance data and the notebook goes down, we think that's bad. So that's why we partitioned this stuff off. Okay, so if you want to get some instance data from your superclass, you have to ask it explicitly and have it return it to you, so that it gets control over who has access to what. All right, so I told you that, there's the synchronous and asynchronous. This is what we call inter-task message passing. I don't know why this slide's here. Do we want to talk about dynamics and well-knowns? Yes, no, yeah, tell you what, if people have questions at the end, if you want to ask me about this stuff, I'll go into all the details, but I think I'm going to skip that for tonight. All right, so now let's look at the schematic for object send. So now here we are, we're in a task, we're executing along, we say, great, I want to talk to an object. Now, you don't have to know that the object's in another task. Every object knows what task it belongs to. So all you do is you say, object send, and you say, here's the message, here's the object, here's a pointer to the arguments, and here's the length of the argument block. You do the object send, the class manager says, hey, it's somewhere else, packages up all the arguments, sends them over, and in every task, there's a dispatch loop. So what it does is it sends this little packet over to this dispatch loop. The dispatch loop then turns around, turns around, does the object call, goes to the dispatcher, calls the method, returns the result. This is that same complicated description, might go through multiple ancestors, the whole shot is all sort of combined in here. Hang on just a sec. And then when the result gets back up to this dispatch loop, it sends it back over to this guy. Now object send is synchronous, so while this whole process is going on, this task is just sitting there, it's blocked. Nothing's executing in this context. It's just waiting until this result comes back over here. It then gets the status result back, and then it continues on. Question in the back.
Towards the beginning that you'd be a little loose about distinguishing task and process.
Yeah.
Are you being loose here, or is it actually a task?
These are, so here I'm trying to be correct in the sense that a task is an execution context. Okay?
Objects are kind of scope to task.
To scope to task, exactly right. Now, these tasks could be in the same process, meaning they're actually in a single address space, or they actually could be in two separate processes. The class manager doesn't care. Okay, it'll do the right thing in either case. Okay, and here's another little bit of code, just like I told you. Message, object, PR. And then the one thing that's different between this and object call is you have to give it the length. Unfortunately, in C, if you hand a piece of code, a pointer, to a data structure, at runtime, there's no way of knowing how big that thing is. And if you're going to copy it into another address space, you need to know the size. So that's what that length's for. Okay? All right, now we're starting to get into the more interesting ones. Object post. Object post, is there a question? Sorry.
So if I'm going to use object send, you better make sure that I'm not that the message I send doesn't have pointers to other things.
Yes, with some caveats. If the pointers are in shared storage, then it would be okay. Because then once you execute this thing in a different process context, since they're shared, everybody can see those values. The other thing is if you know the object is in a subtask within your process, then you know you share a common address space with it, therefore it would be okay. But yeah, you can't just willy-nilly throw a couple of local pointers in and then do a send and hope that the object it gets to can read these things. It'll sit there and look at this pointer and go, there's no memory at this location. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely something you need to keep an eye on. Question in the back?
Also, by length, did you mean literal number of bytes of?
Size of, literal number of bytes of the structure. So you do a size of, like if you have a pointer P, then typically you'd say size of star P. That would say, what's the dereference size of this pointer? Excuse me.
Are you going to talk about the objects, during the object send dispatch loop while you wait for the reply that you're actually dispatching messages and task termination or stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. Do people want to know about this stuff? Yes. Okay. Good, I'll talk about that. I'd love to talk about that.
Before you change the subject,
Wait, who changed the subject? Wait. Did I change the subject? Did anybody here who changed the subject? Yeah, go ahead.
if you send a pointer to shared memory, your task goes away. Does the send itself lock the shared memory, or does the shared memory go away with the process doing?
It depends on how you set it up, which I know isn't the answer you wanted to hear, but there are a couple issues. Where you allocate it, like one of the things you can do when you allocate out of a heap, you can allocate out of another process's shared heap. So if you know you're sending it to somebody and you know you're going to go away, you could allocate things out of their shared heap, send them the message, okay, and then you can go away.
So it doesn't lock it by the virtue that you pass it to another process?
It doesn't lock, because the class manager has, all it knows is there are 30 bytes here. It has no idea what's inside there. So the programmer knows what he's sending, and then you can kind of do the right things. But the class manager, without sort of going to a new language, I mean something other than C, really has no way of knowing that. Question?
When you're receiving a task, the dispatch loop, is that a signal to that task? Is that being executed completely synchronously? What's the deal there?
It's not, you mean, does it asynchronously interrupt the task?
Yeah.
No. Every task, when they get started up by things like the app framework, I mean, in other words, these tasks come into existence because somebody created them. The ones that you typically see are going to be apps and services and the like. What those guys always do is they set some stuff up, and then they call this thing called object message dispatch. Okay, so that's a function. They call that, now it's in a dispatch loop. If a message comes in and it starts executing and it's sort of gone away from the dispatch loop, then what happens is you do a send, it sits in that dispatch queue and waits until you unwind. As soon as you unwind, it executes the next one. But no, it does not like interrupt to some random place and execute this thing and come back out. I mean, the problem with that kind of stuff is it would be nice for getting instant response, but it'd be a disaster in terms of locking your data and stuff. I mean, you know, if somebody could like just interrupt you and start running in your context, I mean, you'd never know what data you could rely on, basically. So, I mean, that would be a hard problem to solve. Again, I mean, with a different language where you could guarantee the access semantics, you might be able to solve that problem. But in C, there's no way. So we've got a real rigid set of places where we can say, here's where execution is going to happen. Question?
Are you paying the same overhead, more or less, just to say instruction count for synchronous versus asynchronous message send?
Well, we're going to talk about asynchronous. I mean, yeah, the instruction counts is about the same, but the semantics are completely different. I mean, you're getting entirely different behavior. So, I mean, comparing their instruction counts, sort of comparing apples and oranges, because, I mean, yeah, they might be the same number, but they don't mean anything to compare. And as I talk about this, hopefully you understand the difference. That, I mean, they really get you different things, and they're really meant for very different purposes. Other questions before I go on? Okay, so let me talk about asynchronous send. So what we call this object post, it's nice to have a different name. So what post does is, again, same kind of thing. You say object post, you say message object, pointer to your argument block, and the length. Now, what post is that although post is asynchronous in the sense that you post this thing and you keep running, it is synchronized with the input system. Okay, now this is going to be a little bit confusing, and we'll go through it slowly. But the idea here is when you do this post, you want this post to go in the system input queue. Other things that go in the input queue are pen events, any kind of other sort of subtask that's running that wants to talk to the foreground, typically puts things in the input queue. So what that allows you to do then is this stuff just goes in the queue, and eventually it percolates its way to the front of the queue. It gets put in this dispatch loop, and then just like the send, it runs through all this stuff, except when it's done, there's kind of no place to send the result. And so the result sort of comes back here, and then it just sort of withers away. But the important piece here is it goes into the system input queue. So that guarantees that if you do a post, and then you come down here and do another post, and then you come down here and do another post, and somebody else in another task is doing post, that all these guys are all getting synchronized in this input queue. And serialized, exactly. I mean, that's the issue here, is that what we're after is we're serializing through the input queue. You're guaranteeing that all the events are getting serialized. Question in the back.
And the second one that's posted to the queue will not be sent until the first one returns?
Yes, you're guaranteed that with post, if you post once, post twice, post 3 times, that they will execute 1, 2, 3, that they'll never execute out of order. Other questions or question over here? Yeah.
I recall an issue, I think it was of PenPointers, or perhaps it was the release notes for one of the recent releases. There was a discussion about a subtle problem with posting messages, I think it was, or maybe with sending messages with tasks that put up modal dialogues and stuff. It seems like this stuff is clearly very powerful, but if I am not careful, I'm going to get in deadlocks and stuff like that. Are there any rules of thumb that you use to avoid problems?
Yes, do you remember the example? I mean, I'll tell you any rules I
There's
know.
a modal filter problem where the modal filter comes up, the modal filter is dispatching, is grabbing all input, and so it gets the posted message destroyed because it's set up. It's set up a second input dispatcher.
Okay.
So it gets the posted message destroyed.
Okay, so what I'll do with this question is, the answer to this question is very complicated. And I'm happy to answer it, but I think what I'd like to do is when I'm all done the talk, I'll take anybody who wants to hear the answer to this question, and we'll go in the corner because, there's going to be 5 people in this room that care about the answer, and there'll be 2 people who understand what I said. So, I mean, I'm happy. I'll make sure all 5 people understand it, but there's a complicated interaction here that there's one system input queue, but basically when you go modal, it creates a temporary second one and kind of suspends this one. And then if you're in this one, it starts passing the stuff through. And so all of a sudden these posts end up going to this modal filter, which is not quite what people expect. It is documented, but it is subtle and it's a little bit weird. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it in some detail. Other questions? All right. So now you saw that little flash up here. Really, there's something different up here at the top. This is post async, okay? Probably a lousy name again. This is my fault. Bad names. I always choose bad names. I don't know what it is. It must be too late at night when I think of these great ideas and I can't think of great names to go with them. Now, post async is just like post, except you notice that there's no system input queue up here. So what this does is when you post this guy, he immediately puts a message in this task queue. You remember you were asking that question before about the dispatch loop and what happens if it's busy? Well, the truth is there's really a little task queue here, and if it's busy, things just go in this queue and they just start stacking up. Well, in this case, you just drop something in the queue and off you go. Now, the real difference between these two is I don't know if I can double click. I know, but am I going to get this back sometime this decade?
Yeah, very quickly.
Oh, right. Okay. The real difference is, now this is the critical thing to take away. The difference between object post and object post async is when I do this post here, notice that typically what happens is, if you think about how all this stuff is chained together, what really happens is some input message went into this task. And then this task ground along and was doing some stuff. And finally it did a post. And that post just went in the queue. And that was the end of it, just sat in the queue. Because the queue isn't dispatching because this guy's running and he's running out of the queue. And he runs along and he runs along for a while. And finally he unwinds, and when he unwinds his dispatch loop, that tells the input system, dispatch the next message. Well, now that posted message can go through. So you'll notice that there's no way that task 2 and task 1 could be running simultaneously. But with post async, that's not the case. Because what happens with post async is instead of putting it in that input system queue, which serializes and guarantees that it's not going to dispatch another one of these until it's done, by putting it in this queue, if this guy's ready to go, he goes immediately. That means that task 1 and task 2 are now running concurrently. Now that's a great thing if that's what you want. But concurrent programming is hard. It's really hard to get right. And making sure you get all the deadlock conditions and making sure you get all the windows right is something that you want to do explicitly. So, I mean, it's okay to do this, but the caveat I put in the header file, and the caveat I really believe in, is if you do this, you better be thinking about the consequences, which means if you have shared data, you better make sure that you put locks around it so that people don't try to access it simultaneously, because that's what this means. If these two guys start accessing the same data at the same time, you got unpredictable behavior unless you lock it yourself. Question in the back.
So does the system input queue really drain into each task through its task queue, or are they two separate sources of...
No, the task queue is with each task, and the system input queue, there's one for the entire system. So that's why we put them up in that system input queue, because that serializes things across the entire system, guarantees that what you effectively do is you single thread all the processes, all the tasks, that are in the foreground. So again, what we're after here is, by default, you get single threading, which guarantees that you have data integrity and all that stuff. And if you choose to use post async, then you can do so, but then you need to sort of take on the burden of dealing with the protection. Question?
I think his question was,
given that it's in the input queue, how does it make it into the dispatch loop for a particular process? And I think the answer is it goes through the task queue.
Yeah, it does go through. I mean, everything goes through the task queue. I mean, what would happen is, you know, if the input system was ready to dispatch the next message, what it would do is it would send a message. It really goes into the task queue, and then the dispatch loop picks it up out of the task queue. Okay? So, you know, all those places where we saw the dispatch loop, there really was a task queue. It's just to kind of unpeel this stuff gradually. I don't put all this stuff all at once. Is this clear? Because, I mean, this is why I'm here. So if it's not clear, please ask me. I mean, this is a great time for me to clarify. Every task has a task queue. Every task can have multiple messages queued up in it. But if there are messages in this queue, as soon as this guy, you come back up here, he says, is there anything else in the task queue? Yes. He starts running. Doesn't wait for anything. This task will just keep running. As long as it can find stuff to pull out of the task queue, it's going to run. Question?
Is there only one dispatch loop per task?
That's what we're going to get to. I'm trying to figure out where to feed that in. I mean, there's only one running at any one time. But what I want to talk about in a sec with this object send is that there actually can be what I call a sub-dispatch loop opened up. And I'll explain to you why. So I've got that on my list, and I will explain that. Question?
Yeah, I'm still unclear as to why the system input queue causes it to run single-threaded.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to figure out how I can explain it without...
Greg, I mean, a simple way to look at it is the input queue is basically doing object sends, right? And we talked about how object send works and the fact that the sender is blocked. So if you think about it that way, then it kind of makes
that's certainly a good start. I mean, I think the key is, and this...
There's slides over there if you want to mark on one.
Okay, well, I'm going to try this. If I don't answer your question, then I'll go right up the slide. This slide's a little bit confusing because it's sort of showing, this happens at time t1, if you will, and this is really happening at time t2. Okay? In reality, at time t1, this is connected to this, which is connected to this. This just dumps something in there and keeps running. But if you go and look at the front of the input queue, it did a send task T2. This is synchronous, so the input system can't do anything until task T2 returns to its dispatch loop, which is up here. So here, maybe where are the slides?
There's some off to the side here.
Some markers. There's a marker there. Okay.
Would you like a cup of water?
Yeah, that'd be. I actually have a cup back. Well, yeah. All right, so. So we have system input queue, and it's here. What's really happening is this does an object send. This is task 2. There's the task queue here, and then there's the object dispatch here, and then it's just executing code, right? It comes down here someplace, and then it says object post. Now, all that does is that just sticks a message in here, and then execution keeps running. All right? Everybody see this? So the idea here is, thanks. What's happened is the system input queue is waiting for task T2 to return to his dispatch loop. But all he did here was do a post. He hasn't returned to his dispatch loop, so it's still waiting. You keep executing code, you know, on and on and on. Eventually, you turn around and you come back up through your execution chain. When you get up to dispatch, dispatch sends the result back to this guy. At that point, he's unblocked and he's ready to dispatch the next one. Excuse me. So now, if we just do this in red, this is what's happening. Eventually, this gets to the front of the queue, and now this guy goes to task 1, and then the same thing. You know, there's a task queue, and an object dispatch loop, and then it's going to run its code. So does that help? I mean, do you see why it's single-threaded? I mean, there's no way anything else in the foreground can run as long as task T2 has control.
Josh was saying the input queue is doing an object send dispatch
to task 2.
Okay, so it's got to wait for it to return.
Exactly, it's synchronized. So, I mean, so that's really the key. I mean, this guy here only dispatches messages in a synchronous fashion. And since everything goes through this guy, you basically get your single threading. You serialize the world.
So is it fair to say without object post async, it's basically non-preemptive multitasking?
It's not, well, in the foreground, while you're doing all this message sending, yes. But the reality is that that's just what's happening in the class manager so that it's easy to write applications. But you can have background tasks running, and they're certainly preempting, running whatever they have to do. And that is the reality. I mean, if you go and do a task list, you'll see that the tasks that are the apps are only, you know, they're 5 out of, 50 that are there. There's a bunch of other stuff in the system. So if something comes in on your COM port, that guy's going to run despite what's happening here because he's not serialized through the input system. Okay? So yes, what you're saying is true, but it's only true for a limited set of people that are in the foreground. Question?
What if the background task sends?
Well, if a background guy sends to the foreground, he's going to effectively, for the time he takes him to wait for the response.
Posts.
Well, if he posts, he doesn't wait, right? I mean, if he posts, he's just going to put it in the input, it'll go in the system input queue. It's going to go to whoever. Now, if you post to a background guy, then he's going to get sucked up into the front, into the foreground, right? Because if you post to a background guy, then when this goes, like, let's just say task T1 is a, quote, background guy. Well, when the input system starts talking to him, he ain't background anymore, because nothing else can happen until he's done.
Okay, so he'll run to, and then he'll run to completion.
He'll run to completion, then the input system will dispatch the next one. So that's why typically, and that's exactly why you use post async, which is typically when you want to communicate with a background task that you've already decided, I want this guy to run concurrently, use post async. Because instead of going through the system input queue, it'll go directly into his queue. He doesn't have to wait for anything. Foreground doesn't have to wait for him. Okay? Really, it's a simple interface. I just can't do it. Okay, now that's all I'm going to say about this synchronized stuff. I've got some stuff here. I think before I do this, actually, let me go back and talk about this. Maybe this diagram here would be. Where are the rest of the slides are on the side? Probably clear slides. All right, so there was a question earlier. There were 2 questions earlier. One I said I would answer later, and I'm still going to answer that one later. But one I said I would answer, and I'm going to answer that one now, which is, people said, well, geez, when you do a send, isn't something else going on? Like, you say that this task is blocked. Well, so I didn't really tell you the truth. It's not really blocked. It's just waiting for the response. So let's look at what the sort of details of what's going on. If you have this task, we'll say it's task 2, it's got its task queue, and then that's feeding into the dispatch. The dispatch is going to come down here. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We say object send. Okay, now we know that object send is going to send off, message to the object with the PRs, all that kind of jazz, and it's going to wait, right? It's going to block. Okay, now I put this block in quotes because it's not really going to block. What it's going to do is it's going to open up a dispatch loop. So there's going to be object dispatch running at this level. So what you haven't done is you have not unwound to the main dispatch loop. So the input system is not going to send a message to this thing because it's still waiting for you to unwind to this one. But if you send over to task 1, and task 1 turns around and sends a message back to you, that message, because send puts it directly in the task queue, this guy looks directly in this guy's task queue. So, he's looking for anything that comes in here. Okay? So this is a real key thing. I mean, I think that, there's some message traffic on the net where people are confused about this. And this is to keep you from deadlocking. Because otherwise, if T2, task 2, really literally was hung waiting for response, and somewhere along the thread, the send, they turned around and said, hey, task T2, tell me the answer to this question so I can go on and get you your answer. And he's sitting there with his, ears closed, then there's not going to be any reply and everybody's going to wait forever. So instead what we do is we open his ears by having this dispatch loop. So things that are part of this thread, this sort of execution thread, if you will, is going to go into task 1, might go to task 2, could potentially go back to task 1 or task 3, kind of winds around. But eventually all this stuff unwinds, and what happens is the reply, remember I told you there's always a status that comes back? Well, what really happens is the reply actually is just a message that goes into this dispatch loop. When it gets it, it says, hey, here's the reply I've been waiting for. It closes down the dispatch loop, gives that back as the result of object send, and then your code continues on. So when I say block, what I really mean is sub-dispatch. Question in the back.
So this is kind of a recursive call to the main dispatcher that maybe masks out system queue stuff, but looks particular for certain kinds of possible return objects.
Yeah, I couldn't hear. The first part of what you said was right, but I missed the end of it. Just say it a little louder.
Okay, it's a recursive call to the task queue handler for that task, but limited to certain kinds of events coming in?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So what he's saying is it's basically just a dispatch loop, except it's limited and it's recursive. It's down deeper in the stack. So basically what that says is posts, if you do a post async, post asyncs won't be accepted here. Post asyncs are only dealt with up here. Just for instance, I mean, that's one of the limits. So the only things that are going to come in here is the send and a reply. Okay?
I thought you said earlier that post asyncs go directly to the task queue.
Which? The posts do. I mean, but what ends up happening is, and I'm going to keep telling you as much of this you guys can deal with. There's a queue here, but the reality is these dispatch loops are pretty smart. And so they can actually say, well, I'll take this, and I'll go take this, and then I'll take the next two. And if these things are posts here, so if that is a post, and this is a post, so I guess these are really posted messages, a better way to sort of, so.
There's a filter in the queue.
There's a filter in the queue. So they're still there, and we still guarantee the semantics that the posts are all executed in order. We just don't guarantee that they're executed before anything else in the queue. Question in the back.
And you're waiting for the reply. What happens if the other guy dies?
Well, that's a good question. What happens if the other guy dies? Again, these dispatch loops are pretty smart guys, and so what they sit there and they go, well, I'll not only look for sends and replies, but I'm going to watch for task terminate. And one of the things that the system does whenever task terminate does is at a very low level, it sends out a message to anybody who's asked for it saying, a task terminated. And you iterate down the list and you say, was this the task I was waiting for? And if it is, it says, okay, I'm going to return a status, OS task terminated, to the send, and it closes the dispatch loop down. So that's the reason that you don't just sort of sit there waiting forever. These dispatch loops are pretty smart about that. Question?
Is there some kind of relatively safe exception handling mechanism whereby something catastrophic like that happens, so it is catastrophic, can unwind all the way back up to the top level?
There's no sort of long jump. The problem is in C, there's nothing safe you can do. You can long jump, but it's like, well, who cares about all that storage we allocated, between the top and here? So no, if you get a termination, this guy will close down and it'll tell him here. And if this guy looks at the status and says, geez, I got to terminate, then he can either say, and that comes back as an error status, he's going to say, geez, this send failed. Typically what happens is that means you return the failed code and it unwinds. And that's what gives everybody a chance at each level to do their cleanup. But no, there's no sort of neat mechanism you can say, oh, hey, things are screwed up. Why don't we, throw back to the top? So it doesn't have nice, error recovery semantics. That's the nice thing about C++ and some, there are languages that are better than C. C is popular. C is a great language, but there are better languages than C. And I think we're evolving in that direction. Question?
Since you brought it up, any C++ announcements, plans, anything you want to tell us about?
We could probably, why don't we hold that until, we're going to have a sort of question and answer after I'm done. So,
Yes.
I'd be happy to talk about this stuff, but let's just do it then.
Put a timeout around these.
can you put a timeout around these? No. And I'll tell you why. It turns out when we originally did this stuff, we had timeouts. And what gets to be interesting is, if you say, I want to send to you with 10-second timeout, and then you turn around and you want to send to somebody else, how long a timeout do you give it? If you say 10 seconds, and I got 10 seconds, what happens when my 10, or you say 15 seconds, let's make it obvious what's going to happen. Well, all of a sudden, I time out while you're waiting for your response, and the problem is it's this kind of additive thing, and there's no easy way for me to sort of say, well, it was 10 to you, and you did 15, so now it's 25. There's just no easy way to track all this stuff down. So what we do is we just say, no, when I send to you, I wait for you to terminate. I mean, that's basically, I know you're not going to respond to me if you get terminated. Because it just turns out there's no simple semantics. Now, it's certainly the case that I can send to you and you can go into an infinite loop. There's nothing I can do about that.
Just make some networking things different.
Well, yeah, the question? We can talk about some of that in detail. I mean, the networking stuff you probably want to be running as a background task in the first place. So then, typically what you're doing is you're posting information, not sending. And if you're posting it, then timeouts aren't an issue. But I've got ideas on sort of our next release that I'm thinking about. So if you want to talk about that, I'd be happy to talk about that with the constraint. Question in the back, and then I'll get you.
Go ahead. Not exactly on the subject, but how do you control preemption of background tasks? Can you tell it, what sort of slice to take and that sort of thing?
There's a limited, this stuff gets pretty dicey, right? Because you don't really know that much about everything that's around you. There's priorities. Every task has a priority. So what you can say is, you can say, I want this task to run before me or after me, right, by saying I'll give it a higher priority or a lower priority. But there's really no way you can say, I want to guarantee that I complete before everybody, because there may be somebody who says, I want to complete before even everybody, you always get in that, who gets there last, right? You can always sort of beat the other guy, or you can always get below the other guy. So you can do some relative stuff using this priority scheme. What there is there's 250 priorities. They're broken up into 5 classes that we just sort of use. The top 50 are system priorities. You can't move one of your tasks into a system priority. Only the kernel can move things into that. And that's what we use for like the scavenge process and the mini debugger and some of those things. They basically want to say, we're on top. We're going to get control before anybody. And then below that, you can kind of raise yourself all the way to the top. If you give yourself the highest possible priority, then you might end up round robin with somebody else who said, I want to be the highest priority as well. For those of you who don't know, basically we have preemptible scheduling. It's priority-based, preemptible round robin scheduling. So the guy with the highest priority that's ready to run, runs. When his time slice is over, if there's somebody else in the same priority, he runs. If somebody at a higher priority becomes ready while he's running, he gets interrupted, put in a suspend queue, and the higher guy runs. That's what it means to be, priority-based, preemptive scheduling. But that's basically what we do.
So there's no sort of fairness algorithm built in?
There's no fairness. Given this is a personal computer, this isn't like a time-sharing machine where it's like there are all these people and you're trying to give everybody their slice, where they're all sitting there. There's a single user. The theory is, and I've seen this work on workstations, I've seen it work here, which is the user typically is driving this process. And usually the thing the user interacted with last, which is asking for the CPU, is probably the thing that ought to be running since the user's expecting a result. So that works like 95% of the time. And for the other cases, the priority-based stuff, that you can say, look, I want to run in the background. I don't want to interfere with things. That seems to work pretty well. And if you really I've got some urgent comm stuff I've got to get done and I can't get interrupted, then you can kind of boost yourself. We found so far that all seems to work out. But no, there's no fairness that says, geez, there are 3 guys at the same priority level, and I'm not getting enough time because I keep having to page something in, which I lose my quantum and because of it, that kind of stuff. Or that slowly says, these guys that are below a higher priority are getting starved. That's certainly possible in our system. If a high priority guy just says, I'm going to take every cycle there is, the guys below him, there's nothing they can do about it. They don't slowly creep up with this guy.
If I go into a modal set, like I put up a node, right, in the modal state, and some other priority comes up that has a higher priority than mine, what happens?
Well, how did it get started? See, the thing is, you got to think about what that means. You can have a task that's at a higher priority, but how did it all of a sudden come ready? I mean, if it's waiting for input, then it's not ready to run, it's waiting for input. And if it's not waiting for input and it's ready to run, then it's gonna run, you're gonna get interrupted, but it doesn't care. I mean, it's not waiting for input, it's just gonna run.
But I could be in a model setting, for example, I have a pop-up choice in a node.
Yeah.
And the user goes ahead and keeps selecting the pop-up choice.
Yeah.
And I'm making system calls. Now, does that system call unwind to the kernel and they decide that, oh, your task is at lower priority, I have to swap at this point, but I'm modal. And
Well, it's more than that. I mean, you can have the modal node up, and if a higher priority guy comes ready, he's gonna run. I mean, he's just gonna run.
What is he going to do to the input system and the screen? I'm not.
Well, he's not. If he goes to the input system, he's gonna stop running.
Okay,
Right,
that's
so,
what was correct.
yeah, I mean, and if he goes to the input system and you're modal, then he can't get any input, so he's gonna wait. So, I mean, now, you had a question, and I promise I'll get back, sorry.
I want to make sure I understand. In your example here, when it goes down to that object send and starts up that second dispatch loop.
Right.
Say an object post async comes in to, I assume, the top level dispatch.
Right, so that's what this scribble, you can recognize this handwriting, can't you? I'm not sure a pen-based machine would. Yeah, that's what these were meant to be, these sort of post-scribbly gobs. Really were meant to be sort of, here's a post message. It just went into this task queue. Okay, but the only dispatch loop that will actually pull these guys out is the top level.
So it has to unwind all the way back.
It has to unwind to the top. So, I mean, what will happen is this could get pulled, this could get pulled. These guys will just stack in the front. They won't get lost, they'll just stack in the front. And then, excuse me, when you get back up here, then they'll get picked up and run immediately. I mean, as soon as you get back up here, before anything comes back from the input system, those things that have been post-async will run.
What are the things that don't get put off till the top level?
If these are, so these guys here this would be a send message. This would be a send message. This would be send, and then this could be a reply.
So will those send messages start a new execution thread?
Not new. What they're going to do is this dispatch loop here is going to see this, and it's going to start running it on the same stack, same execution thread, just recursively nested, if you will. Okay? So they'll run down here, and then when they return to this dispatch loop, it'll say, well, is there anything else to run? Yeah, okay, I'll pick this guy up. It'll run that. It'll just keep doing that until it gets to this reply, and then it'll say, oh, here's the reply from this original send. So it'll close itself down and then return that as the value. Okay, question?
Is the reply simply processed in order, or is it, if there's a reply in the queue?
In order, absolutely. Because, I mean, typically, it's kind of unlikely, it's possible, but it's pretty unlikely that these sends would be here with this reply. I mean, I put them here, but if you really slice this thing up in time, it's unlikely that this reply would be here. Because typically what happens is you send out, this send is actually typically coming from somebody you sent to, and so they're waiting for the reply. When they get the reply, then they give you your reply. So that's possible, and it's certainly ordered like this, but it's unlikely that would happen. Other questions? Question in the back?
This is sort of a pulling back view of it all, but I can't help but notice the irony that you're doing this wonderful analog song and dance on the left, and there's this totally static digital doing nothing.
Yeah, well, you know.
Whose job is it within Go to do the analog digital conversion?
Well, let's see. I haven't found my sort of interface port. I got 10 things. Just plug me in here. I don't even know where it's like, I'm ready to go. So, yeah. Now, are you complaining of the fact that you can't get your documentation to talk the way I do or cough the way I do, or that this information isn't available, or what? I mean,
well, no.
So what's the higher level of comment?
I assume that it's available, but it's available in a static bound copy of something. But I'm wondering whose function in Go is it to kind of enliven those static bound copies of things and basically.
Well, that's what we're having this meeting for. Right? I mean, that's why you came, right? So you could hear me give you these great tidbits that you can't get except on static digital form. Sorry. Okay. Do people get? I'm going to skip this. I mean, you can read the manual again. I was just going to, if people didn't care what I was saying, I was going to go through this stuff. But you guys can read the manual.
Well, Craig, one thing about the owner, the message owner. I mean,
you always get somebody in the crowd.
Usually yes.
Usually yes, yeah, right. Go ahead.
So the object owner, I mean, is actually important because that's the task that owns the object. So when you do an object send, you know it's going to run in that task, right?
Right.
Now, message set owner, you're kind of saying, well, you know, the object was being run by this task. Now I'm going to hand it to another one.
It's a great feature.
Can that actually work? I mean, it seems like the odds are if you give it to somebody else, it's just going to not work right.
No, it's great. I mean, I do it all the time.
Could you give an example?
Sure. I mean, one of the places I use this is you're sitting in your task, and you say, all right, I'm going to create a bunch of objects. Now I'm going to create a subtask. And now I don't want these objects. I want them all to be in my subtask. So I just change the owner of all these objects to be the subtask. And now whenever you send to them, guess whose context they execute in? Not mine. They execute in the subtask. So I mean, it's that kind of stuff that works great. Now, you can get perverse, right? I mean, you can take one of your objects and just like give it to somebody else. And, you know, if it runs with global storage and stuff, I mean, it'll run. I'm not sure this is what you intend, but, you know, it'll run. So you can do that kind of stuff.
Interesting virus propagation.
Oh, we got, you know, we could have another little sub-meeting after. You guys want to talk about virus? I got great Trojan horses here. I know, lots of them. But that's a different story. I mean, again, this is, you know, we have our model of protection is that we want to protect the notebook from accidental, like, you know, if a program just goes berserk and writes at some random location, the notebook shouldn't come down. But if somebody gets on the notebook with a piece of software and says, I'm going to take this notebook down, yeah, go ahead. It's going to go down. I mean, we're not going to stop malicious. I mean, because you get into this funny issue. This is a personal machine, you know, and you can either decide to protect it and then make it run slower because, you know, basically the barriers and the cost of verifying everything on the way by, it's pretty expensive. We could do it, but we basically chose to go for the performance and go for the accidental kind of protection and not go for the virus. So yeah, you're absolutely right about the virus, and there's a lot of places in the system that you can kind of mask as one thing and ship yourself over. I mean, you know, you can move and copy yourself. I mean, this is kind of relatively mild compared to some of the other stuff you can do. I mean, you go out and write somebody's resource file. I mean, you know, so there's a lot of that stuff. It turns out that really solving a Trojan horse problem in a system completely, so nobody can do it, is pretty expensive and I'd say near impossible. I mean, if you're really serious about it, I mean, you know, level 2 security is, you know, not going to happen when notebook appears for a while. Question?
No, I just thought maybe you would unwind slightly and
I see.
kind of
okay.
get through this, and then we could split up into discussion groups and go on.
Well, listen, I was trying to move on and ask what you know about this owner. Yeah, it's only 10 after 9, no problem. So, how much do you want to unwind? Like, just keep going. You know, class will let you implement class methods in abstract classes, and you can subclass. And you can ask me about it later. So, and now you know all this stuff, right?
Yep.
Right.
You know more than what's here, right?
Post-direct.
Oh, post-direct. All right, I'll tell you about post-direct.
I'm kidding.
Okay, no, listen, look, this is perfect. You guys, when you look in the header file, you're going to see this thing is post-direct. I wrote the commentary for it. It makes sense if you know what I said tonight, and if you don't, you'll never figure out the comments. What post-direct does is, remember how I told you that these post messages only get dealt with by this top-level dispatch? If you do post-direct, guess what happens? They go in here. All post-direct guarantees that as soon as this task can execute your message, it will, no matter what level it's at. Thank you. Okay. You know, I didn't think I'd ever be able to explain post-direct to anybody.
Somebody get the lights.
Let alone have somebody use it.
Hey, I know somebody who uses it, is in this room.
Have to do with the class manager right now, right?
Yes.
I have two questions about this group. One, in terms of funding, like what is the funding? Are we going to contribute to it? How is that going to work? And the second one is, there's talk about publishing code and so forth in Brad's newsletter, but the fact is the code, you've got to type in stuff. It's pretty useless in this day and age. I'd much rather see it machine readable. We can have a bulletin board of our own. We're going to share on Go, CompuServe.
These are questions that I bring out. Thank you for bringing up the questions, first of all. Let me hit the funding first. Right now we have zero funding. Well, we've got negative funding because I put in a little money here and Go's put in a substantial more money into this than I have. without some support from the developer community out there in terms of some dues or whatever, we won't be able to do very much for very long. So we are going to have some dues from the people. In addition to that, when we distribute software, I'm going to try to get a little bit of money every time we distribute some software. Not a lot, but a little bit of money so that we can bring that back in so we can do some more of these things. Basically, I have to run this like a business. And the business, it isn't going to be a for-profit business. It's a non-profit business, but at least I have to have income coming in so I can do more things. So one of the questions, and I again encourage you to fill out these questionnaires. One of the questions is, how much do you value this thing that we could do? How much do you value that? Say, well, I'd spend $22 a year for a newsletter, and I'd go $12.50 for distribution, and I'd go this, and I wouldn't spend over $60 a year to be a member. I need to have that feedback from you people as to how deep the pockets are, and then I'll know how much service I can give you. But without some pockets out there, I cannot give you service other than we could, make little hand diagrams and stuff up here, turning on the projector and whatnot. But I do need some money to be able to do this. We have had a suggestion about a BBS. Does that conflict or complement CompuServe? I don't know. We could post things on CompuServe, I think. A BBS would be expensive because there's always the maintenance of it and there's the purchase of it for several grand and that sort of thing. But please give me feedback on your on those letters, and then next meeting I hope to have a proposal of how we're going to fund and what things people want to do, and it's going to be directly based on those papers that I get back. Did I answer your question? Are there any other questions?
So we're going to take a break for a few minutes and then...
Well, I think what's happening now is we're opening it up for questions. If somebody has a question, no matter what it's about, they'll pose the question, then whoever's got the answer, that one was global enough we needed to answer for everybody, but whoever's got the answer, then we'll get together with those people, but we'll also break up for cookies. So we're open for questions now. Pose a question on anything to do with pen-based computing, and we'll try to get you somebody hooked up that can answer that. Yes?
I have a couple of usability questions with respect to PenPoint. One is sort of they're both more or less about the architecture of the system, page turn time and disk access. On my 3125, the battery goes dead real quick because the disk is spinning all the time, and it seems like, from my understanding of PenPoint, the way it is right now, in order to guarantee some amount of safety, I have to leave it that way. I want to find out what is being thought of along those lines, and also what sorts of things can be done to accelerate page turning time and other things that the people that we've been sort of putting this thing in front of complain about. Something that goes along with that is screen resolution. Obviously, it's a hardware problem, but people have a real hard time reading their scribbles, even if they aren't translated. And also interrupts, being able to say, oh, I didn't really mean to do that, stop, go back, and whatnot. That's obviously a much harder question. The first two are things that maybe someone can talk about.
Who is it that could couple up with him and answer those questions? Josh, do you know who would answer those questions?
Yeah, I'll take a run at some of them.
Okay, so you two get together and talk about that. I've got a question I'd like to get together with somebody on. The readability of the fonts when they get rendered on the screen isn't exactly what I'd expect. The characters seem to run together. If I remember correctly, I believe someone on integer point sizes that might help line it up. So is there somebody that I match with? S? Okay, I'll talk with S after him. Yes.
I'd like to match up with somebody that can give me a definitive statement or a time or some policy on statements about printer drivers. What your policy is going to be so we can write printer drivers and what you might or might not provide for different printers.
Arjen and I will shoulder that one together for you.
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Who's doing voice pen integration either within Go or outside? Or
Oh, I'd like to hear about that myself. Anybody in voice pen integration? Okay, so I'd like to meet with you too when you guys talk. Okay, any other questions that people want to talk about? Yes.
Yes, I'm currently implementing the international libraries and worrying about formatting and parsing dates, times, numbers, and all the other stuff that goes word selecting words. And anybody who has interest in this and has suggestions on what it should do or not do or whatever, I would be happy to talk to you right now because I'm doing it.
Okay.
And you talk to me now or
cry later, right?
Yeah.
John Bennett, is that?
Yes, John Bennett.
Okay, John Bennett. So cease John Bennett if you have anything on that. Other things that people want to make.
Okay, speeding up layouts of UI components, speeding up reading resource
Okay,
files.
that will be S, so you'll have CS about that one. Yes?
rapid prototyping in general.
Rapid prototyping, is that also S?
No, I think that did Autry take off?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, Autry. Hold up your hand, Autry.
He's a rapid prototyper.
Okay.
Rapid prototype.
All right, yes?
I got a couple things I need to find out. We need to pick up some information on where Go's going with fax support, what schedules are for that, and what the status of cursive-connected handwriting support is.
Okay. Okay, Arjen, handle those. You missed, by the way, let me give a plug for another organization. If any of you haven't been to the CEF PenSig, you might want to think about going to that. Last night, Go gave a talk on their handwriting recognition system, and it was a very, very good talk, got a lot out of that. It meets on the, David, is it the third Wednesday of the month?
Third
at the Cooberley
Coverly School on Middlefield Road in Palo Alto. It's about 1 block north of San Antonio Road. So you can take the San Antonio exit off 101, go 1 block north of Coverly School. Room H1 at 7 p.m. the third Wednesday of every month.
Right.
Run by the Software Entrepreneurs Forum. If you're not a member, it costs $7 to get in. If you are a member, it's free, part of your membership. Bill McAlpine is the director of that. McAlpine. And you can look up the Software Entrepreneurs Forum phone number in the Palo Alto phone directory. Also, if you're talking about resources, the slide that I hand wrote. On the machine whose domain name is llustig.palo-alto.ca.us is an internet mailing list called PenPoint. Any mail that you send to that mailing list will get redistributed to everyone on the mailing list. Currently, there are 85 entries in the mailing list. Some of those are gateways into companies. There's a Go entry in the mailing list, so it comes into Go. There's an IBM entry. I don't know where it goes inside IBM. So there are at least 85 people on the mailing list. If you want to be added to the mailing list or subtracted from it, send your request to the second address up there, PenPoint-request. That's the administrative address. That goes to me, in fact. It's been pretty useful so far. And
2 L's?
Yes.
L-U-S-T-I-G?
It's short for Larry Lustig.
Okay, any other mapping kind of questions?
C++.
C++. Who can talk about C++?
Craig.
Okay.
I can talk a little bit about
Autry.
If anybody has any tools for visualizing message sends, message receives, message flows in the system, I'd be interested in looking at that because I sometimes get confused who's sending what to whom when.
Okay, anybody have some information on that he can back up with David?
Well, I have one piece of information. There's a flag class manager that let me. It's a little laborious.
This guy.
Yeah, this guy. This guy.
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, David, we'll talk to you. Any other mapping? Anybody else want to do some mapping?
If you're short of internet addresses, there's one on my card that's in a pile on the table out there, so you're welcome to send them in.
Yes.
Possible mapping for you in the way of drumming up support and interested users and such. DMOG is no longer just about the Macintosh, and that's largely a legal decision, apparently. I don't think there's anything that precludes it from forming some kind of pan-interest group.
Okay. Why don't you bring us some information about that next time? I think people might be interested in that.
I have one more general thing.
Yes?
If people want to give me feedback on the SDK or the development environment or something, right now I'd be happy to talk to them. So.
Many.
Okay. Other map.
You want to string me up?
Yes, sir.
Non-violent feedback, exactly. Vegetarian.
I spent some time experimenting with how to speed up compilations on the SDK. If you're interested, come see me during the break, and if I'm not looking down a cookie, I'll be happy to tell you what I did.
You got about a 5x speed up, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm hoping to get more if I can find a caching IDE controller that behaves the way I want. So, see what happens.
Any other mapping? Yes, Lang.
When I came around the corner earlier, I heard you saying that a bulletin board would be expensive because of the software and so forth. I actually have some excellent bulletin board system software. So if somebody wants to actually pay for the phone lines, which run $4.45 a month each for incoming only lines, I've got the software and an old 286 box we can start running it on.
Okay, I've got a place where we could get the phone lines in, so it might be coming up. That would be great. Would people, let me just have a show of hands. How many people would like a bulletin board local in the area? Okay, all right. It looks like we probably ought to get together on that.
I have a suggestion for
Yes.
the bulletin board, though. I don't want to have to start checking 5 different places for email or bulletin.
That's one of the things I've worried about.
So let's pay attention to what we do there to make sure we don't overlap with all the other places that you can find information.
Excellent.
Like software, sample code.
Yeah, excellent critique, because I'm already on internet and CompuServe, and then this will be yet another one.
Well, we'll talk more about this during the break. Let's not talk about it now, because I have some ideas of how we can minimize the problem too.
Okay.
Okay, but that, I'm glad you brought up that criticism. Other points? Yes.
I talked about getting started.
Aha. Who's the good person to talk to about starting?
Arjen.
Arjen, all right.
What was that?
Getting started on our system.
New blood.
Oh.
Yeah, Arjen, great. Glad to have you.
All we need is a visa card.
All right.
My name's Frank Chen. I work here, I write documentation, and we'd love to come visit you if you are developers of PenPoint to figure out how you're using our documentation, how you're learning. So if you work in the Bay Area and you'd like us to come visit you so we can get feedback on our documentation, and I'm new, so I'm not I'm not tied to the old way we're doing it. Please contact me. It's frankchen@go.com, and there's flyers out here.
Okay, see that man. That's good. Thank you very much. Other mapping? Looks like it's cookie time. I want to thank you
Wait a
guys.
second, one other thing.
One other?
If you want internet access and don't have it, get my phone number. I got one copy of my business card up here. I'll give my phone number and give me a call or something like that, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming out. Please, please, please hand in those responses. I need to know what your responses are. And